Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. It was on 5th of August 2019 when India revoked the special status of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir by abrogating Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution. It unleashed the reign of terror on innocent Kashmiris. The BJP government has ever since usurped the fundamental rights of the innocent Kashmiris by imposing a complete curfew and a complete communication clampdown. Now, according to Kashmir Media Service, since August the 5th, 2019, there have been 792 killings, while 2,362 people have been either tortured or critically injured. 21,265 civilians have been arrested. 1,104 structures have either been arsoned or destroyed. 52 women have been widowed. 128 children have been orphaned. And 129 women have either been gang raped or molested at the hands of Indian troops stationed over there in large numbers, making this place the largest open-air prison in the world. Now, all parties Hurriyat Conference has appealed to the people of IIOJK to observe 5th of August as the Yom-e-Istehsal Kashmir. Also, we have seen that a 5-member bench of the Apex Court of India is hearing the petitions which have challenged the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution. As well as we have seen, former governor of IIOJK, Satyapal Malik, has revealed that the BJP government could repeat another Pulwama-like false flag operation to win the general elections in 2024. What the innocent Kashmiris have been going through since the revocation of Article 35A and 370 of the Indian Constitution. We'll be discussing this important matter with our panelists. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Naazir Mahmood. He's senior journalist. Dr. Naazir, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. And also in the studio, we're honored to have been joined by Dr. Awais bin Wasi, expert Kashmir Affairs. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Naazir, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Wasi. Dr. Wasi, when we talk about the 5th of August 2019, the revocation of Article 370, scrapping the special autonomy of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, what sort of brutal tactics Indian authorities had been resorting to ever since then to suppress that legitimate struggle for the right to self-determination of Kashmiris?
You know, this Article 370, since this revocation has passed 4 years, and I think it's a right time to take stock of the situation and the developments after August 5th, 2019 and now. Initially, when India revoked this article under this Reorganization Act 2019, Home Minister Amit Shah claims that this is the article which is an obstacle in every positive development in Jammu and Kashmir. And once it is revoked, so there would be peace, there would be end of violence, as they say, terrorism, and there would be progress and prosperity. These were their claims. But as a matter of fact, if you see the current situation, no such development we can see on the ground. And this is something paradoxical and something strange, that if it is so positive, why they had to deploy more forces and why they had to cut off all communication, why they had to communicate all networks, you know, and put behind the bars not only the leaders of resistance camp, but those people, Chief Minister, former Chief Minister, they were serving their interest. Mehbooba Mufti, Umar Abdullah, Farooq Abdullah. So this thing, in fact, indicates that these claims that they were making, they were not in congruent with the with reality, you know. And this is I think the contradiction which we can see their claims, their speeches, and practically. Now the whole of Jammu and Kashmir, the state of Jammu and Kashmir we call, that is under siege. And you have mentioned rightly in your opening remarks that it has turned out to be our largest militarized zone, largest prison of the world. So if that is the situation in Kashmir, so I think it raises questions about all the claims that they made. I'm not talking about the legality and illegality about it, we can discuss later on. But so far, I'm just talking about their claims on the face value. They are, not...
so what I understand is, contrary to the claims what the BJP government made at that time of the revocation of Article 370, rather than things improving over there in the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the things have worsened ever since then.
Exactly, exactly. If you see, I came across a report published by BBC in which there was a story of a person. They belonged to a tribal belt, and they were saying that we have been told that this revocation would bring a seismic positive shift in our lives. But what happened is that our houses turned out to be debris. So if you see this one, second in terms of economy, if you see the domestic...
I come to that very point. That's a very pertinent point to be discussed later in the show. Dr. Naazir, since the revocation of Article 370, snatching the autonomy of that illegally occupied territory, and as per the UN resolutions, the people of Kashmir should be given the right to self-determination, but it was not only in the violation of its own constitution of India, but also against the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. Earlier we saw when this particular article was being revoked and the kind of scenario that was created afterwards, there were certain international voices that we heard, but ever since we haven't seen any sort of concrete action when it comes to the role of the international community. Why so?
That is the most disappointing part of the whole story, that internationally the condemnation that should have come forth did not come. Initially, you are right that initially there were some voices raised, and even the United States mentioned, though it did not condemn, but it did mention that democratic rights and human rights should be observed, things like that. But now after 4 years, we don't even see that. And unfortunately, during this time, India has been able to establish good relationship even with Muslim countries which are considered close friends of Pakistan, like Saudi Arabia, UAE. They have been able to restore and strengthen their. So this is the and unfortunately, even OIC has also not been able to play a very vocal role in this whole thing. But let me remind you that even before, considering that only revocation of this article.
Pardon for the interjection over here. Recently we saw that the Secretary General of OIC was here. He visited the areas along the line of control and the working boundary, and he also said that the world should actually know the kind of atrocities that have been unleashed on the people on both sides of the line. So there is a contact group on Kashmir also at the OIC. So it's when we talk about the role of OIC, it been in way or the other been impressing upon the international community, especially the UN, as well as when we talk about the major Western powers when they talk about upholding the human rights. So when we talk about their responsibility, where their conscience goes when it comes to the gross human rights violations here in IIJ?
Well, the kind of violations that are taking place and the blatant disregard for international law that the BJP government has been committing demands much more than statements. There have been, as you mentioned, OIC also issues statements here, but what international community needs to do is much more than issuing statements. What do I mean by that? Such kind of atrocities must draw number one, severe condemnation, number two, even sanctions, because we remember other countries, just like to give you one example, South Africa. It is, in Kashmir, what BJP government is doing, it is nothing short of an apartheid regime. Targeting Kashmiri Muslims like this there are at least 3 or 4 dimensions. Number one, this is constitutionally, it is according to even Indian constitution, this was wrong, because even with the presence of article 370, the situation was not ideal. Pakistan even did not accept that. We wanted Kashmir, not to be part of India. Pakistan wants it to be part of Pakistan. India wants it to be part of Kashmir. Kashmiris themselves, they
United Nations Security Council resolutions, the relevant resolutions speak of giving them the right of a free and impartial plebiscite.
Ideally, that is the solution, ideally. So even constitutionally, as I was talking about 3 or 4 dimensions, the first dimension is the constitution. This articles, for my viewers, if I just quickly give the background, this article came into force in 1954. And why 1954? Because at that time, before that, the Prime Minister was Sheikh Abdullah, and Sheikh Abdullah was not probably towing the exact line of Nehru. Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, the next Prime Minister who was appointed, he wanted Kashmir to remain part of India, and Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad remained Prime Minister for 10 years, 54 to 64. So, according to Article 370, Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir had their own constitution. So that means there were 2 parallel, one was Indian constitution and the other was constitution of Kashmir itself, Indian occupied Kashmir. But having said that, the Indian constitution, Indian government, whatever changes it made, it had to be made in concurrence with the Constituent Assembly of Kashmir. But while abrogating this Article 37, what India has done, that constitution itself has been abrogated. Now Kashmir has no constitution, it has no constitution of its own, it does not have its own elected government, it practically has no say, it has no state, no equal rights as other states have. So what is the situation of Kashmir? The situation of Kashmir is right now, as you said, that it is not only illegally occupied area, but it is also like a prison. It's similarity we can draw with Israel. And I think that BJP government is learning from what Israel is doing there to Palestinians, making a present-like situation. So that's what. So this is one is constitution. Number 2, very important point is demographic shift that the BJP government wants to make. Previously, the property rights were not given to outsiders. Only Kashmiris who have been living there for generations, only they had the right to buy property. Now, after abrogating this 370, what the BJP government has done, the BJP government has allowed property purchase to all outsiders.
What that means, non-natives,
including
domicile certificates.
Yes. So what will happen then? Now the people from outside will come, and after some time, if the situation continues, we will witness a major demographic shift within Kashmir. So that will be devastating.
So what does the international law say about it? Isn't it illegal?
International law obeys the local law. That means the constitution of the Kashmir, which has been abrogated now, that should have held supreme. And according to that constitution of Kashmir, foreigners or outsiders were not natives, were not allowed to buy property there. So international law should follow what law was there in Kashmir at that time. So this is the second one. One, as I said, one aspect is constitutional, the second is demographic, third is the psychological impact that is taking place. Psychological impact not only on Kashmiris, because of course Kashmiri people, when they live in such a present-like situation, they are distressed. Their people are being killed, as you just mentioned, nearly 800 people have been killed in 4 years. That means 200 people in a year, which is a huge number. And then people being abducted, disappeared, and there are widows who don't know where their husbands are. So, and this number is in thousands. So this has a psychological cost, psychological burden on the Kashmiri people. And not only that, even within the Indian army, when they are also human beings, when they say, there are some conscientious, when they say these atrocities being committed, we have seen a higher rate of suicide within Kashmiri, within Indian soldiers, Indian forces. So that means that Indian army is also those soldiers who serve in that area, they are not in perfectly stable psychological condition. And lastly, socially speaking, the society has lost its vigor, its dynamism, its independence. The people, the young people don't see any opportunities there. So that and indirectly what BJP government has done while trying to impose their will, they have even weakened their own case. Locally, nationally, internationally, they have weakened their own case, and then they have even harmed India itself. So if the BJP government thinks that they have strengthened their position domestically or internationally, they have not been able to do it. So this is the last point that I
right, Dr. Wasi, when you talk about the revocation of Article 370, making this internationally disputed territory a union territory, so what does that particularly mean?
In fact, as Dr. Naazir Saab has very eloquently explained the whole context, that how this law, this revocation, this practice, it was against India's own constitution, and because for Indian's constitution, the concurrence of the state assembly was required, and at that time when this article was revoked, there was no assembly. Only 2 or 3 bureaucrats, they are deciding the fate of 1.5 million of Kashmiris. So this bifurcation of the state and turning it into 2 union territories, it is against India's own constitution. It is against the bilateral agreement between India and Pakistan, Simla Accord. It is against the United Nations Security Council resolutions, because one of the Security Council resolutions clearly mentions that no side can unilaterally alter the material condition. So if the material condition of the dispute is changed, so it will have bearing and fallout on the future dispensation of that issue. So by all angles and from all perspectives, this is the move which cannot be justified. So India, in fact, when India is unable to suppress the Kashmiri sentiment and mass uprising, when it decided to revoke Article 370 and 35A, and I don't think now the case is in Supreme Court, and I'm not sure that what would be the fate of this, what would be the verdict and fate, but I hope that if the conscience of the judges, if it is awake, then I think the decision would be in line.
I'll come to
with
that point of what role the Apex Court of India has got to play in this particular. What are the expectations after it hears these pleas regarding this abrogation of Article 370? Now, as Dr. Naazir Mahmood has very comprehensively talked about the fallout on different fronts, which include the constitutional, demographic, psychological and social also. You were already mentioning the economic fallout of snatching this autonomy. What had been the economic condition of the people over there?
India was saying that it would organize a conclave summit, in which the investors from India, they would come here, and they would, business opportunities would be provided to them. Basically, when such kind of foreign investment, not to improve the local economic situation, but to advance the political objectives of India, then the local economic industry, especially which is mentionable, is the apple industry. Because of this consistent curfew, because of this prison-like situation over there, so that industry has been largely compromised. So I think that if India's moves remain consistent, so it would have very negative implications on the local domestic economy of Jammu and Kashmir.
Right, Dr. Naazir, when we talk about the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, particularly vis-a-vis Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, there's been a crackdown against the journalists also belonging to the international media outlets. So is the condition similar as was at the time of revocation? Is that similar today also?
Well, I don't see any improvement. Now there is slight improvement in the sense that the internet services and communication lines have been opened. For example, the telephone connection to the rest of India is restored, which was cut off initially. Even internet service was cut off. So that is slight improvement is there, but we need to see it in terms of overall freedom of expression in India. It is much worse in the Indian occupied Kashmir, but the BJP policy overall in India has been nearly the same, because BJP is a Hindu nationalist party, and as a Hindu, and this is what this is, BJP is a reincarnation of RSS, Rashtriya Sevak Sangh. Its leaders like Vajpayee, the former prime minister, he was former RSS leader, RSS activist. L.K. Advani belonged to RSS. Even Murli Manohar Joshi and present set up there. Even Ramnath Kovind was RSS activist, and Narendra Modi. So what that means? That means once they came to power in 2014, gradually they have strengthened their position. They have targeted nearly most voices, dissenting voices, mostly in Kashmir, but in the rest of India, the situation is also no better. They have acquired or taken over all media houses, all apart from one or two newspapers like Hindu and all, which are vocal against the Modi government. The rest have been, cowed down, and most of the newspapers, be they Hindi newspapers or English newspapers or even regional newspapers, because BJP in the last 9 years, they have extended its tentacles in states also, other states also. So in all these areas, what they have done, any voice which speaks against the BJP, they targeted. For example, even Rahul Gandhi, as you know, he said something against the Prime Minister and he was disqualified, and he is fighting a case in the court. So this is the situation. As a Hindu nationalist party, it is an extremist party, and extremism is no good for any country, and especially the use of religion, be it in India or in Pakistan or any other country. This is very harmful for society. So in that way, Indian secularism has been harmed, and Indian society has been harmed, and not only Kashmir but other areas also. If we talk about northeastern states and the situation of minorities, maybe we will speak in the next segment. But the situation, responding to your question about freedom of expression, the situation is dire and dismal. And there are people who are raising their voices, but as I said, that the media is completely taken over by Hindu nationalists.
Is it because of that complete communication clampdown and the journalists and the media personnel who are being booked under the draconian laws like the Public Safety Act and the Unlawful Activities of Prevention Act? That's why the world is not seeing the real picture on the ground, what atrocities are being committed continuously, unabated by the Indian authorities over there?
Well, unfortunately, the world community, what do we mean by world community? Mostly this is US and Europe, European Union mostly, and even some Arab countries. Now these countries have their economic interests first. So since Kashmir is, India is a big country of 1.45 billion people, Kashmir is hardly 10 million people. So in that case, for the world community, they have their economic interests, and to serve their own economic stress, they are overlooking or ignoring Indian atrocities. They don't want to annoy the BJP government so that their trade relations and other relations can prosper. This is the only reason because India is an economic power, we cannot deny this. So no matter whatever we say about BJP has done at least one thing, and that is the economic growth that they have seen. They look at their foreign exchange reserves, their import and export. India is a much greater power than it was 10 years back. So because of that economic might, I think the international community is not taking stringent action against India.
Right, Dr. Wasi will talk about the draconian laws booking the journalists and media persons under these draconian laws such as Public Safety Act and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Is that because of it that the international community doesn't get the real picture of the real atrocities going on over there in IOJK?
I think that international community is quite well acquainted, well aware
exactly
about what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. But due to the corporate interest due to this, political economy. I think that eclipsed, that thing, and they have advanced their economic and political interest because of India's standing. As far as these laws are concerned, they are termed as black laws, not by me or not by any journalist, by human rights organizations. Human Rights Watch said it. Amnesty International released several reports about UNAPA. So these laws are the ones in which people, they do not have a right to trial. They do not have right to appeal. So the norms and legal norms and practices which should be the part of that legal framework, unfortunately these laws are not in line with that. So if you see the current situation with particular reference to the journalists and youngsters and civil society activists, unfortunately they are arrested, and they are not in the prisons of Kashmir, but they have been sent to different jails in India. So, for example, one classic case is the case of Khurram Parvez. United Nations, one of the bodies of United Nations, also raised concern and exposed his human rights credentials that he has been defending. But since he is in the prison, Fahad Shah is a journalist. He has been contributing to different international newspapers. He is behind bars. Gohar Gilani, he is a journalist, and he came up a recent book. He is also behind the bar. So there are several people, peaceful activists. They do not have any questionable track record, but since they raise dissenting voice, because of that they are
so do they have any sort of legal remedial measures they can adopt when they're booked under these black laws?
They are doing it, but I'm not very hopeful about it, because this discourse of Hindutva unfortunately has been penetrated into the all state apparatuses. So if some international intervention is done, maybe there might be some relief, but generally what is happening in India is not very optimistic.
So when we talk about Indian Apex Court taking up the petitions, more than 20 of them have been clubbed regarding this abrogation. What are your expectations? Do you think the justice is going to be served at the end of the day, and this decision of abrogation is going to be reversed?
What I think is that Amit Shah, in one of the statements, he also mentioned that we may, means India may restore statehood. And Satya Paul Malik, in his interview in which he made that revelation about that Pulwama attack, in the same interview he mentioned that statehood must be restored. So what I think is that statehood might be restored, but this special status, I don't think that it could be restored. So why I'm saying so is because in the next year, BJP wants to project the same plank, revocation of Article 370 in the Lok Sabha polls in the next year.
So how are the two different? How do you differentiate if the statehood is restored and the special status is not given back?
Statehood could be restored as the other Indian states are, but the provisions which were incorporated in Article 370 that may not be given to the Kashmiris. For example, 35A, that is part of Article 370. For example, this land law that no outsider or non-Kashmiri can buy land. Perhaps they may not allow, because they have already kind of allowed many Indians to buy land, buy property over there, and they have taken a number of other measures, domicile certificate and other things. So I don't think that they would be interested to reverse all these developments that they have taken so far. The only thing that can bring change and that can reverse is the mass uprising of the people of J&K. That could be.
Right, Dr. Naazir, what are
Just
your...
to add to this,
Please go
your
ahead.
question, the difference between state and the
Special status.
special status. You know, he's right, I agree with him that they may restore state status. What that means? That means there are right now 29 states, but those states do not have their own constitutions. They do not have their own flags. The Indian constitution is supreme, which overrules state constitution. So, whatever the central government does, the central government according to Indian constitution does not require concurrence of the state legislature. Special status meant that Kashmir had its own constitution, its own flag, and Indian central government had to seek concurrence of the Constituent Assembly of Kashmir. So, if they restore the state status, they may not restore the constitution,
Right.
Kashmir's constitution.
Right.
That's what it is.
So, what are your expectations from the Supreme Court of India?
Well, I am not hopeful, though Indian Supreme Court is one of the most powerful Supreme Courts in the world. In what sense? In the sense that in India, now this theory of basic constitutional structure that is prevalent, and this is from 1970s. In 1975, when Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister, she imposed emergency, and that emergency, and before that emergency, what Indira Gandhi did, she appointed her favorite judges, and those judges validated the emergency. But after that, what happened? The Indian Supreme Court, cancelled or declared null and void all those amendments on the basis of the Indian Constitution. That means right now Indian Supreme Court can overrule parliamentary acts, legislation passed by the upper house or lower house. All they can be cancelled and declared null and void by the Supreme Court itself. So, Supreme Court in that sense, Indian Supreme Court is very powerful. So, this is the positive aspect. But the negative aspect is that during the past 9 years, from 2014 onwards, 9 years, BJP has appointed those judges, and majority of judges right now are pro-Hindutva and pro-BJP. And this happens in other countries also, like in America. You see, when Republican Party is in power, they try to appoint conservative judges. So, similarly, the Indian judiciary is also now composed of most conservative judges, and that is the reason why I am not hopeful. And what they do, they keep delaying it. They don't take immediate action. For example, there was one against BJP, this Aadhaar scheme, which BJP launched way back, 5 years back. And so the Supreme Court did not even issue a stay order. They kept on pondering, and after 3 years, when the Aadhaar scheme was already underway, they declared it constitutional. So that has been the tendency of Indian Supreme Court right now.
In this case, there was also a delay initially.
Delay, yes. Ideally, this was challenged immediately. This revocation of Article 370
what we understand, the justice delayed would be justice denied.
Justice denied, of course.
It'd be a huge blot when it comes to the capacity of the Indian judicial system.
It already, this is blemished. This is Indian judiciary does not have a face to show to the world the way it has been condoning atrocities, the way it has been releasing. Look at the Gujarat massacre. Gujarat.
It exonerated the then chief minister.
Yes. So they released all those people who were convicted, who were sentenced. The Indian judiciary has released them. So what that shows? That shows that Indian judiciary now is practically overtaken by Hindu nationalist judges, and I do not have much hope for them, barring a couple of them.
What options then the Kashmiris have at their hands, even if the judicial system doesn't serve justice?
Well, the situation is bleak. The situation is bleak. I think they should keep pressing with their demands. Even those politicians who were loyal to India, like Farooq Abdullah, Umar Abdullah, Mehbooba Mufti and all, even they are asking for restoration of the previous special status. So the struggle should go on, though I am not in favor of any violent struggle, personally speaking, because if you look in a broader perspective, the situation in Kashmir is that, you know, India claims that the entire Kashmir is a two-tongue indispensable integral part of India. Pakistan claims that the entire Kashmir should come to Pakistan. India cannot occupy the entire Kashmir, Pakistan cannot take. This is the fact on the ground. So probably the only option for the Kashmiris themselves is to press for their demands, so that Kashmiri issue should be resolved in accordance with the UN resolutions.
Now, Dr. Wasi, when we talk about the situation women in the occupied territory are facing now, as per the statistics of Kashmir Media Service, since 1989, it's a huge number, 11,259 have been either gang raped or molested. Since 5th of August 2019, 129 have been either gang raped and molested. We see a lot of reports suggesting that Indian troops use rape as a weapon of war. What options at the hands of the women over there in Kashmir?
The plight of women, that is, I think there are some very tragic cases. If we see, for example, Kunan Poshpura, in which around 100 women, unfortunately, they were gang raped by Indian military, and there were many other, and still that rape is being used as a weapon. So the options is that they should write, they should raise their voice, they should generate some discourse on the subject to sensitize the concerned international bodies, international community, so that they can come up with their support and they can take up that case at international fora. Because this is the aspect where the situation of or human rights abuses with regard to women and children. I think if it is properly and effectively projected, so there would be buyers at international community, at international level, this thing could be taken. So what I think is that it should be properly projected, highlighted, documented, presented to the community as well as to the opinion makers, to those quarters, so that it could be further amplified, this voice magnified, and some alleviation in their plight could occur.
Right, Dr. Naazir, when we talk about the former governor of IIOJ, Satyapal Malik, earlier in interview he talked about the Pulwama attack and the kind of incompetence of the Indian authorities related to that. Now, in a recent interview, is revealed that India could repeat another Pulwama-like false flag operation to win elections in 2024. How startling these revelations are?
Well, governments do that. This is disgusting, this is despicable, but governments do indulge in that, and more so Indian government, BJP government has been doing this. So there is a possibility, but this is good that their own people are now voicing this concern, and this there is a possibility that they can do it. But if they do it, I don't think that it will carry much weight now, because this tactic has been exposed now. So if they try to project that there has been an actual attack, I don't think it will serve any purpose. What they are targeting at, the BJP government of course wants to remain in power forever, and the more they incite religious feelings, Hindutva feelings among majority Hindus, because 80% of population of India is Hindu. So they want to, and they have been successful in capitalizing on those religious feelings of the people. And if you look at northeastern states also, where BJP Manipur, where BJP government is in power, so they are also, whenever they see that they may lose elections, they try to incite religious feelings. So I think they may not be able to stage another Pulwama-like attack, but what they will do is to incite further religious feelings, religious extremism, Hindutva feelings, so that the majority Hindus turn to BJP and vote for it. So it might be there.
No, we have seen a pattern of Indian authorities, especially of the BJP leaders. They start pointing fingers towards Pakistan whenever such type of incident happens, in which later on is revealed that there was some internal Indian hand in that, rather than Pakistan being involved in that. Even if they are not in a position, if they are exposed already, even if they go about it doing another false flag operation on the lines of Pulwama attack, or how Pakistan should be dealing with this sort of a scenario then?
Well, Pakistan should steer clear and plainly, you know, Pakistan on diplomatic level, Pakistan should be more, I don't think that Pakistan's diplomatic performance has been something that we can be very, you know, proud of. They have not been very successful in projecting our case internationally, and that is one reason why international community does not come openly in favor of Pakistan. Though sometimes they do issue statements, but the kind of response that we expect, it is not coming forth. So I think we should mobilize our diplomatic missions more effectively. We should project more our case internationally. But having said all this, there should always be a room for negotiation. Right. As Prime Minister recently mentioned, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, that we are open to talk.
Right. Dr. Wasi, how startling these revelations by Satyapal Malik are, that there could be another false flag operation like Pulwama?
You know, if we see the history, so it could be a possibility, because to have the political advantage, to have the political benefit in the upcoming elections, and this happened in the past as well, because we have discussed in one of the programs a book written by Maharashtra police officer, senior police officer, who killed Karkare, in which there are a number of such incidents in which fingers were pointed out either towards Pakistan or some militant groups in Bangladesh. But later on, when investigation conducted, it turned out that internal elements, they were involved. And the classic case of Samjhota, people were involved, and in this current government of BJP, they were released. So keeping in view all this background and all this consistent pattern, I think that it could be a possibility to have the political, because in Lok Sabha elections, in Indian elections, Pakistan card, Kashmir card is still relevant, and they can exploit it.
Dr. Awais bin Wasi, expert Kashmir Affairs, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio we were joined also by Dr. Naazir Mahmood, senior journalist. Dr. Naazir, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves. Thank you for watching.